Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for our next installment of the bi-weekly webinars through North Texas Soccer and our coaching education department. But this week, we got a super special treat. So I've been really excited to invite on and be a part of this just in the times that we've interacted since coming on board with North Texas. I've learned a ton from, Dr. Sari Rose, and I knew you're going to learn as well. I mean, this has been something that as we started looking at how to set these things up, we were going to focus on the grassroots in the first couple of sessions. And I can't think of a better way to close out this part of the webinar series than you, Sari. I'm glad you took the time out of your day to join us. But this is Dr. Sari Rose. She's a senior manager of Grassroots for USU Soccer. And this is really kind of neat because I don't think I can find a better person that's going to help us do best practices and how to set up the practice plan and what to look for and how to develop it. Like I said, I'm really excited to have you on board, especially being our last of the series for this group. Without further ado, it's all yours.
Well, everybody, I appreciate you joining in, and I know people don't have to have their camera on. Once again, I know this is more of a webinar that will open up for questions, but it's also going to be online. So if you want to go in and change your name to the age group that you're working with the most, that'll help give me an idea so I can kind of help with some of the examples. But if you can't do that, that's okay. What Warren really wanted me to do was come in and you've seen Mojo. I was part of the process of creating U6, U10, or U8, U10, U12, U14 session plans on Mojo. And so there are 10 weeks per age group of sessions. So that is a fantastic resource for you to really just pull up and use. But the reality is, if you're creating your own sessions or if you're looking at those Mojo sessions and you're trying to figure out how to coach within them, this is what that session's geared towards. So, without further ado, this is a video I used to always show when I used to coach teach the youth modules. It's from Publix, and it's just a fantastic idea to kind of keep perspective when we're dealing with young players. So if anybody's having a problem with it, just give me a thumbs down. But if not, I'm going to play it and hopefully you can hear it. Go get him. Here you go.
Thanks. I'm nervous.
You're nervous?
Yeah, it's his first time on a real field and...
You'll be fine.
Okay, yeah. Follow the ball, buddy. Nope, can't pick it up. Get up. It's not like the backyard, is it? Ooh. Better go see how he's doing. Hey, buddy.
Did you watch me?
Yeah. Yeah, you okay?
I was awesome!
Proud sponsor of youth soccer.
So one of the reasons why I always show that video is as you're watching it, the kid is clearly not really playing fantastic, right? He's missing the ball. He's looking up at the sky. He needs his shoe tied, and you can sort of see the dad starting to get like, uh-oh, this isn't looking good. This isn't looking good, right? And at the end, he's like, man, I'm going to go over and talk to him. And from the dad's perspective, that game was a failure, right? Like the kid just didn't play well. But when he goes over to talk to his son and asks his son how he's doing, his son's like, I was awesome, right? Because at that age, cognitively, young kids associate running around and playing hard with doing well. As they get older, 11, 12, they can start to see other kids and they compare themselves. But when we're working with a lot of our younger players, effort is associated with doing well. And we just need to keep that in mind. And I also highlight it because the environment that's created, right? Afterwards, there's snacks, it's fun, the dad's coming over and giving him a hug. And the reality is the grassroots is the entry point for a lot of kids to the sport. And sometimes it's also the exit point. But at US Youth Soccer, we really want to extend kids' playing experiences. And what the research has said and what we've seen is that environment is everything, right? You can be the most knowledgeable coach, But the reality is if you're not making it fun, then kids may not want to come to practice. And I've done a lot of different coaches, and this is actually a picture of my daughter. This is when they were U9. So her friend is the redhead. But the reality is if practice isn't fun, then as kids start to have a choice of whether or not they want to come, they're going to decide not to come if it's not fun. And so we as coaches want to make it fun. And I'm going to show some different ways that we can do that. But we also need to make it safe. I work with kids across the spectrum. And it's really interesting because when I was dealing with a lot of our high school boys who were on our rec team, one of the things that they talked about was when they came to practice, it was one of the few times that people asked them like how their day was and how they were doing. And so it was really interesting that the kids who were predominantly refugees and loved soccer really enjoyed practice because they felt like they could come, they got to hang out with their friends, and there was somebody that actually cared about them. And so I think creating that, not just physically safe environment, which we can go through Safe Sport and learn about, but that emotionally safe where kids want to come. And it is player centered. You're looking at my daughter's little team there. And one of the things that we do is once kids kind of get into things, we really talk about like getting them involved in the practice and having them, it be their practice. And I'll get into that more, but always remembering that we're there for the players. And so we need to think about what their wants and needs are. And then this last part, which is really important, and it's a big term, mastery oriented or mastery orientation, is just creating this environment where kids are developing. It can be competitive, but it's kids competing within themselves to get better. And so how we create a mastery oriented climate, even with your rec practices, right? I've coached at the college level. I've worked with scouts for youth national teams, but I am literally week in and week out working with my U10 rec team. And so these are the things that I try and do with that group. The biggest thing is mistakes are learning opportunities. We want, especially with young girls, we want them to recognize that it's okay to make a mistake. When I was a college coach, I can remember going to a Buffalo Wild Wings for 35-cent wings, which dates me. And I was talking with the head men's soccer coach at Butler University, and we were watching Van Nistelrooy, which also dates me, but he was playing and all of a sudden he scored a goal, and the guy turned to me and he said, that's the difference sometimes between men and women, right? Van Nistelrooy got stripped 3 times and he just kept going at that player. And then on the 4th time he scored. And a lot of times with our young players, and a lot of times sometimes with female players, is if they make a mistake, they're looking to the sidelines and then they're afraid to keep going. And the reality is in soccer, we probably make more mistakes in a game than we actually are successful. And we want to allow our environment so that kids know it's okay to make mistakes. If you're dribbling and you fall down, fantastic. That means that you are trying your best and you are trying to get out of your comfort zone. So especially in the grassroots level, when kids are just getting introduced to soccer, we want them to fall down, and that's a part of the process. We want to acknowledge effort, right? You're working hard. Hey, that's great. I'm glad that you tried that. Okay. And then we can build on the skill, but we want them to feel like it's a safe environment. They can make mistakes and they can try their best. And then explaining that process, right? Hey, my daughter was notorious 2 years ago for dribbling to a forward, or she was a forward. She was dribbling towards goal. And then she would do this like pullback because we were working on pullbacks in practice. And then she would miss this scoring opportunity. And my friend's like, hey, it's great your daughter's learning these pullbacks, but she does them at the wrong time. And I'm like, I know, but she's 6 or 7 right now. And I want her to get comfortable on the ball because when she's 9 and 10, she'll start to figure out when she should do it. But if she's not learning how to be comfortable on the ball now, that's always harder to learn that, right? And so I explained the process to her, right? Hey, I love that you went and did that, right? I know you didn't get that shot off. What could you have done to get the shot off? But also explaining the process to parents. My parents understanding hey, we're learning a lot of these different skills. They may not always use them at the right time, but we want them to keep trying to use these skills because as they get older, they'll be able to figure out the right time, but them getting the comfort and the physical sensory abilities is really important at a young age. And like I said, it's focusing on the individual. And I use this example just with my daughter because she just started swimming, and on a Monday she joined the swim team and was told that she was going to swim the breaststroke on Wednesday. And so literally on Tuesday at practice, we had a YouTube video and we were like watching how to do the breaststroke. And the first time she disqualified, and she's 9 years old, right? Just turned 9 this summer. But she made the the city championship meet, and she ended up advancing to like the finals. And she was so nervous, right? All along, we were like, hey, you're just learning. And then she got to the finals and she saw that the top swimmer was like a ridiculous amount of time ahead of her. And I'm like, listen, that kid swims year round. Like, you started 30 days ago. Like, it's okay. You're not supposed to win right now, right? But like, you just getting here is an accomplishment. And if you really want to get good, then we can invest the time, right? But really focusing on that individual process. And how we focus on the individual is posing those questions, right? When you're setting up activities, a lot of times we used to set activities like, hey, we're going to, the first person to 10 touches on the ball wins, or, hey, we're going to dribble through grates for a minute. Who's got the top score? Okay, who can beat 12, right? Instead of focusing on who can beat the best kid on the team, can you focus on, can you beat your last score, right? Because if I'm just started at soccer and the best kid on the team's been playing for 2 seasons, I'm probably going to really struggle to beat that kid, but I can beat my last score. And so focusing on the individual. And likewise, I mentioned, can you go a little faster? When kids are learning a dribbling move, they're just walking through the motions, and then maybe they're jogging through the motions, and now can they do it at a higher speed? So what we want is that idea of, we don't focus on the outcome of, am I the best on the team right now? Did I get the top score right now? We want to focus on that process and the idea of kids understanding that they can continually get better. I did a dissertation on my soccer team, and part of it was helping kids to feel more comfortable on playing. And when I interviewed one of the boys and I said, hey, do you feel like after this season you're a better soccer player? And do you feel like you've learned? And he goes, oh, coach, I suck at soccer. And I'm like, oh my God, there goes all this research, right? But he said, but I know that I'm getting better. And I know that, you and Coach Claire believe that I'm getting better. And so I want to keep playing. And I thought that was really powerful, because the idea is, we may not make kids into a Messi, but are we getting kids to continue to want to play? Are we getting them to believe in themselves and put in that time? So as a coach, we can gear our sessions to create this climate where kids want to continue to get better. I have a background in positive youth development, and I use this, and it's very much in line with what US Soccer does, but it's kind of a session plan format that has 5 areas, and I'm going to get into it, but it's this idea of relational time. I have a lot of kids on my rec team. Some have moved up to the academy. A bunch have stayed. And it's funny, I was joking with someone that the ones who have stayed aren't necessarily the good players, but they love coming, right? And so they're kids who might have quit a year or 2 ago, but they're having fun. And so they still come out, even though soccer, they're learning it, right? And part of that comes from the relationships that we try and build, an awareness talk, and then you get into the kind of the meat of your activities. And when you're wrapping up your session, you sort of have a team meeting and self-reflection. And so how that looks like, and this is a picture of my daughter when she was younger. But when kids are arriving at practice, right? Not everybody arrived. My practice starts at 6 and kids roll up between 5:50 and 6:10. But as kids are arriving to practice, I use that opportunity to check in with them, give them a high five. How was your day? Right? I'm trying to learn a little bit about them, get to know them a little bit, and just, connecting with them. Because as I build rapport, I can also, at that start of practice, I can kind of assess players' moods, right? Who are the ones that are maybe off the chain because they were at school all day and they didn't get to run around? And I may need to give them a little bit more time at the beginning to goof off and do that, right? Is there a kid who maybe looks like they had a bad day at school and I've got to go over to them and kind of talk to them and see what's up, or maybe talk to mom or dad or see what's up. But that, as kids are arriving, that time gives me a chance to connect with the players, assess their mood. I might be able to ask some questions. For me, and I'll get into it, I want this to be a player-centered session. And so I'll ask kids sometimes if they want to demonstrate. As some of you may know, if you're in a circle and you call out a kid and they're like, hey, Warren, can you demonstrate this? Warren's either going to have a personality where he's going to be like, yes, ma'am, or he's going to shy away because he's just been put on the spot. And so a lot of times at the start of my practice, I might ask a child, hey, I'm going to be showing the pullback. Last practice, you were really good doing the pullback. Are you comfortable if I ask you to demonstrate? Right? But I get some of that out at the beginning of practice instead of putting kids on the spot. And then also I kind of set the stage for volunteers, right? I can ask the kids as they're coming in, who wants to help me maybe set up a field? I can ask somebody, who might want to help with the pennies. I can also set that stage for the parents because, if you're working in rec, having parents help you with extra grids is really important. So that first part, while I get to practice early and I'm setting things up, I call relational time, and it really helps to build that. Once the kids are there, we have what's kind of our awareness talk, right? At my practice, we do play, practice, play. And so as kids arrive, they actually know to come in and they start playing, and they'll play for the first 8 or 10 minutes. And then I'll bring them back for this awareness talk. But I kind of set the expectations and the theme, right? I'm going to tell the kids, hey, we are going to be working on dribbling moves. Okay. And I'll maybe ask who remembers some dribbling moves from last week. And I'll kind of say, I want us to really work hard. We're only going to do a lot of this for maybe the first 6 or 7 minutes of practice, and then we're going to play. But I really want you to focus for those first 6 or 7 minutes. And then when we get into the games, I really want you to try the moves in the games that we're playing. And so today it's only going to be maybe 2 or 3 different moves, but I really want you to kind of do it throughout the practice. But I can also set some behavior expectations in that beginning part, right? Like, hey, last week there was a lot of people talking when I was talking. I really want, when I say, freeze, I want us to get into our professional pose of freezing and everybody can listen to me. But that's kind of the setup before I really get into my session. And then session activities. I know that Tom Arnett spoke to this group. Play, practice, play is what US Soccer had really promoted. It's changed a little. To be fair, I do a lot with outreach kids. And so it was hard sometimes with play, practice, play to get kids playing and then bring them back to focus on the session. But what I've found with my recreation, and I've had this team from like a U8 to a U10, is because I have kids that keep arriving at different times, I get there, my daughter and whoever's there early helps me set up the fields. And so we start by playing 2v2. And then as kids show up, it's 3v2, and then it becomes 3v3. And I've got 2 grids, and the girls really know how to set up and play. And then we go into our practice, which for true play, practice, play is you have one activity and then you can make it less challenging and more challenging. For me, I usually have about 3 activities in that core practice phase. And then we end with our game phase, which, I have 12 kids on my team. We play 7v7. So I usually ask some of my parents to maybe hop in goal. I try not to have the parents out on the field because I don't want a big parent to fall on a little kid. But that's one style. If you're in Mojo and you're looking at the fall 2023 US Soccer, we ran what's called simple to complex, and it's pretty straightforward. You have a technical warm up. There's no pressure. It's usually kids learning how to dribble or kids learning how to pass. A lot of times with the younger kids, it's a nice fun game, but there's no pressure, right? We want the kids to have an opportunity to learn how to do a fake or a feign without somebody trying to take the ball away from them. And then we build into activities where there's opposition. And so in a practice where we're working on dribbling, it could be kids dribbling through gates where they're just learning the moves. And then we add maybe gate monsters where they're blocking the gate so the player can't get through it. And then we go to where now they're able to steal the ball, and we build that opposition. And then we might build from they were dribbling just to gates to now maybe they're playing 2v2 3v3, and then we kind of build into our small-sided game, which for us is 7v7, where there's no restrictions and there's we try and play to the laws of the game. I know this is being filmed, so if people have questions and you want to put them in the chat, you're more than welcome. But I also want to make sure that I kind of get through this for the webinar part, and then I can open it up to questions at the end. But if I'm going too fast, let me know. So that's going to be your session activity. And then after the session is over, I'll bring all the kids back together and kind of have a team meeting. Part of our team meeting is we review it, right? So especially with young kids, them understanding, hey, what was the theme of our session today? Okay, we worked on dribbling. Who can remember a couple of the dribbling moves that we did? Okay, yeah. Who can remember how our body should look like when we're dribbling? Justin, yeah, I can. I think this goes on to YouTube and you'll have access to YouTube, but I can also email this to Warren and you can just have access to it. But in the team meeting, we kind of review the sessions. I also have players rate, like, was there an activity you really liked? Is there something that you might want to do next week? Once again, a lot of my background is in player motivation. And so kids feeling like they have ownership of this session is really important. They have ownership of the team, and the relationships is key. So we do what's called it's actually called a 2-clap shout out. A lot of times you can ask kids what they did well, but it really keeps them focused individually, and that's good. But we also want them to connect and learn how to build relationships with everybody on their team. So this 2-clap shout out is where we're asking players for who on your team do you think was a good teammate? And what did they do that was a good teammate? And so that's an opportunity for them to think outside of themselves and recognize other players on the team. And then, they might say that, Maddie, she passed to me in the game. And, that's really, I really appreciated her including me in the game. And so we'll say, okay, Maddie, on the count of 3, we do a 2-clap shout out. It's 1, 2, and everybody claps. And then it's a way for us to get everybody on the same page clapping together. Luke, you said, from your experience under 6, what before they move up to the next group at age, what should they expected to be able to do, right? So here's the biggest thing, right? We want them to have fun. US soccer has their standards of, at this age, what's your focus on? The reality at U6 is kids are just learning how to control their own body and they're learning how to control the ball. So there's not a checklist. Kids develop at different stages. But if you're working with U6 players, you're really working on general coordination and you're working on ball control. And so that's something. And Warren, I know you have all of what the, developmental needs are and what you should work on, you can send out. So that's a great question. And then we always do kind of a self-reflection where, once again, when we're working with players, we might ask them, if you worked hard today, give me a thumbs up, thumbs to the side if it wasn't that great, thumbs down if today wasn't your day. And we ask them to kind of reflect on their effort. We ask them to also reflect on, how they felt like dribbling. And then we might also reflect on, were they a good teammate? And then I'll actually, after a session, I'll kind of think about what went well and what didn't. And that's where kind of I take notes on, is there a kid who really struggled? Did the activity I did just didn't work, right? We all have these ideas of a great activity and then we do it and it doesn't work. And so I kind of keep track of that. But that's really like a daily format of every session. My kids know that they're going to show up. I'm going to kind of chat with them, talk with them. They're going to get into their playing 2v2 and 3v3. And then we kind of get into the awareness talk. So I preview everything for the kids. It also lets them feel good that they know what's happening, right? Get into our game and then we break it down. I'm coaching my daughter for at least another year. I was a college coach for years. I've been a club coach for years. If you're just a volunteer, then maybe you're not going to have a notebook. But what I've found is, when I wasn't sure how long I was coaching, I wished I could go back and look at sessions that I did. So I always talk about the idea of creating a coaching notebook, especially if you think you're going to stay with your child for a couple of sessions or a couple of seasons. I use the Mojo app just like everybody else does. And so I'll pull it up, but I also have a tiny little notebook, and I just kind of write down what I did so I can keep track. And then I do put down, hey, these are the dribbling moves we worked on, here's kind of where kids stand. I also will keep, the game. I write down we play 2 25-minute halves. I break it into 4 quarters basically. And so I keep track of who played and where they played. Because that just helps me over the course of the season, right? Can we get kids in? Once again, we want kids to leave feeling good. And I do have a player, and she's not very good. She also thinks she's a wolf half of our practices. And she kind of is good for playing maybe 4 or 5 minutes, really wanted to be the center mid, right? And last year we had a kid where, 4 or 5 kids went up to junior academy and 4 or 5 kids were playing. And she just kept asking me to be center mid. And I'm like, you know what? You're going to be center mid today, right? And we put other kids around her, and she went out there and she kind of was all over the place, right? But like, her dad was so happy she got to play center mid afterwards. She was so happy because instead of her leaving my season being like, yeah, I kept asking and I never got to play, she left getting to play center mid, right? And she's back this year, right? I don't know what kid at 6 is going to be fantastic at 15 or 16. It's just my job to keep them in the pipeline. And so that's why the fun is important, and we're developing skill, but we want to keep them engaged. When you're planning your session, and I know Chelsea on the previous talk thought about transitions, but we talk about the game at the end and working backwards. And so if I'm playing with, 4 goals at the end and I've got some cones in the middle, how am I going to set up my field so I'm not taking 3 or 4 or 5 minutes or moving goals around, right? Are my goals in the general space where I need them to be? So when I finish my little activity, we can hop into the game and the goals are right there. Is my field set up so that I'm not going from, one part of the field to another part of the field? So I know Chelsea touched on that. I didn't want to get too into it, but just understanding how you set up your fields to clarify where the kids are playing, and also, so that you can have smaller transitions. You only have 60 to 75 minutes. So if you're taking 4 or 5 minutes to switch from activities, it's going to eat up a lot of your session time. And then when you're planning your session, think about questions that the kids might have and what you're trying to accomplish in your activity, right? Like if we're working on passing this evening, right? And it's something that we did a little bit of last week, but not too much. And so I'm going to make sure I'm reviewing if the kids know passing inside of the foot. I'm going to make sure that kids remember, what we talked about with receiving and just kind of their body, right? I kind of know that a lot of my kids struggle with opening their hips. And so I think about that when I'm creating this session. So overall strategies, right? Nowadays, you can pull up a Mojo session and see the session, right? You can Google U5 and they'll have 6-week session plans. But here are some strategies that within those activities, I think can really help kids to enjoy your practice, kids to improve as a player, and kids to want to stay involved. So strategies to support player development. My number one thing is you kind of modeling respect, right? Because if you're engaging at practice and if you're modeling, it's going to help kids. I worked with middle school boys one season. We had a bad call. I started to get angry at the referee, and then all of a sudden the boys started standing up, and then they were like, yeah, that is a terrible call. Yeah, that is crap, and then the parents and I just realized that like when I sat down and was like, this is a middle school game, this is not the end of the world. It was a bad call, but like if I sit down, the boys will sit down, right? And so I think modeling respect and communicating with the kids, not at them, right? And I know some of this is not the technical nuts and bolts of soccer, but this is the stuff that gets kids wanting to come and play, right? And the longer they play, the more they can learn. And so talking with the kids, right? Engaging them, listening to them, actively listening, where like we work a lot on when one person's talking, like we're all paying attention to them and they have that voice, and being positive. Right? Like I'm a snarky person. My daughter yesterday just was like, hey mom, what did you say that I have? And I'm like, what? She's like, my cough. And I was like, oh, tuberculosis. And then all of a sudden, my mother-in-law's like, please don't go to school talking about tuberculosis. Right. So I can joke, but when I'm with the kids, I do try and be positive. I try and make sure that I'm not getting angry or showing being angry when I am, because I want the kids to feel safe and comfortable. And that goes back to an environment where they can make mistakes, right? If I'm, if they make a mistake and I'm like, oh, on the sideline, then even though I'm telling them it's okay to make a mistake, my body language and what I'm showing is it's not okay. And it's really interesting. I watch a lot of sports and kids that look to the sideline after they do something, have been in an environment it's not okay to make a mistake, and they're getting feedback. And we want kids to make a mistake and hustle to get the ball back, as opposed to make a mistake and look to see who saw me make the mistake and is it okay. So I think modeling respect is really important. Setting expectations, right? I've worked with kids that are the worst kids in a school, that are in an after school program because they're the worst kids in the school. And I've worked with kids that are paying, $1,800 to $2,500 to be on a U8 competitive team, right? But setting expectations for kids across the level helps with the management of your activity and your session. And so talking to kids about like, hey, I need you to try your best here. I want you to focus, and we're only going to go for a minute. Can you go as hard as you can for that minute, right? We'll have time in between to talk. Setting the expectation of working together. Hey, this activity is going to have you problem solving. I do a team kind of building activity at the start of some sessions. The snarky way is to call it fetch, like you would fetch with a dog. Warren, I think we call it like the retrieval game, right? But the idea is, you have 2 or 3 kids, they have a soccer ball. You're going to throw that soccer ball out and say, hey, you 3 have got to bring it back to me with 6 fingers and a head. You 3, 6 fingers and a head. You 3, 6 fingers and a head. And they're all trying to problem solve how to bring it back, and one kid's holding it, and then there's 2 fingers here and 2 fingers here. But I set the expectation like, hey, you've got to work together and you've got to figure this out. And so I think that's important that we help kids understand what they're supposed to do. We set the expectation that they're picking up cones and they're helping me transition between activities. Hey, we only have 60 minutes, so we're going to need your help in between. And I think that helps the kids feel a part of the team. And then the other part of this is this requires communication, right? We have young kids sometimes that aren't comfortable speaking. And so we try and put them into activities where they have to speak. I do a warm-up game called Math Dribble, right? Kids are dribbling around. I say 2 + 2. You have to scream out the answer, and then get into a group of 4. When we do passing activities where they might have to keep track of how many passes they make, right? I set the expectation. Hey, this is going to require you as a group to work together, communicate, keep track of your passes. Sometimes if I did that the first practice, I might do the same activity the second practice, and I may not set the expectation of communicating and see if they remember, right? Because it's a little bit of learning. And then I'm like, okay, well, hey, how are you going to know if you guys won if you don't keep track of your score? Something else that we really do is when you're creating your session, you want to make sure that you're allowing all players to have success. And so a couple of ways that we can do that is we can vary our challenges. Gate dribbling. A classic way of getting people to vary challenges is you have some gates that are small, you have some gates that are big. And so now kids that maybe struggle will go to the bigger gates to dribble through. Kids that want to challenge themselves can go to the smaller gates, right? We can vary it where I might be playing a game where it's 2v2, but I'm in charge of the soccer balls. And so I can play a ball out to the weaker kid on a team to make sure he's getting the first touch or she's getting the first touch. I create those opportunities for success. I also create opportunities for kids to feel good because I do ask them to demonstrate. Once again, I use this example. Lorenzo, I'm like, hey man, we're going to learn how to dunk today. So I've brought Michael Jordan in to teach everybody how to dunk. And you're all like, that's great. Jordan just broke down how you step to the basket to dunk, but he's also Michael Jordan. I'm not Michael Jordan. I can't dunk. But when I asked my daughter, Callie, to show how to do a scissor, she's the same age as the other girls on the team. You know, they know her. And so one, it allows her to feel good about herself because she gets to be the demo queen. But two, the other players are seeing that it's somebody like their age. And then the other big thing for success is time versus reps. We always used to grow up where we would say, hey, you're going to do this for 2 minutes, juggle as many times as you can for 2 minutes. I'm sorry. Juggle, first person to get to 20 stops, right? And so we're going to juggle 20 times. And then as soon as you get to 20, you can sit down. If you want, in the chat, you can kind of put, what's the problem of doing something for reps versus doing something time? Think about it. Hey, first person to 20 juggles, you sit down. And I'll give a moment here. The other thing that's important when you are coaching is the idea of wait time. So when you ask a question, you give a little bit of time for the kids to marinate on their answers, and you don't jump in with an answer. But I also know that we are online, and so people may be doing other things. But the biggest thing with doing something for reps is the best kid on the team it might take them 30 seconds to get 20 reps. The worst kid on the team may be doing it for the same amount of time and then realize, oh my God, I'm at 10, everybody else is 20. So I'm just going to go 11, 12, 13, 14, and I'm going to sit down too, right? Whereas if I just tell people, hey, we're going to practice juggling for 2 minutes, see how many you can get. Everybody's juggling for 2 minutes. When the worst kid looks around, he's seeing kids juggling and not sitting down. The best kid is getting additional opportunities to juggle because everybody's going for 2 minutes. So the worst kid on the team isn't feeling bad about themselves and just stopping when everybody else stops. And the best kid on the team isn't losing time of practice because he did it faster than everybody else or she did it faster than everybody else. Yeah, you're right. Like, kids get done quickly and the other feel bad. That's spot on. The other thing that I think is really interesting is some kids learn how to become teammates. A lot of times we just assume that kids know how to make friends. And it was really interesting when we were working with kids and looking at social interactions is the fact that, like, not every kid knows how to make friends. Not every kid knows what being a good teammate makes. And so one of the things you want to, as a coach, is try and help them, right? So a lot of times I have kids on my rec team, my girls rec team, they're all from, there's a couple that are from the same school, and then there's like these pods, right? And so a lot of times I'll have them get into groups, but they have to have somebody from a different school. So, right, you could be in groups of 3, but you have to have at least 2 different schools represented. Or I might have them, okay, you have 2 minutes. I need you to figure out a group that you can be in where there's somebody who has a birthday. They could either be in the same month or the month before or the month after. And then sometimes I've got to go over and help, but it gives them a chance to get to know each other. And it gives me getting them into different groups, because not all kids are going to walk into a setting and be like, hi, my name's Sari Rose, and what's your name? Right. And so as a coach, we need our players to be good teammates. We need our players to be able to work together. We need our players to be able to problem solve together. And so we take for granted that they know how to do that, and we've got to help them. Another thing is at the beginning of practice, sometimes we'll have them doing the math dribble. When they get into their groups of 4, they have to figure out who in the group of 4 has a pet. And so learn something new. And then they'll do it, and they might do that for a couple of times and say, okay, now you have to figure out who is the older sibling in the group. So it gets the kids to build interactions, but it's while they have to dribble a soccer ball, and then they build interactions, and then they've got to, do something, and then they're building understanding. Peer coaching, I really don't do this with kids that are kind of under 12, under 10. But as kids get to 12 and older, we try and get kids to peer coach where, especially with my middle school boys group, we had like one group would come to practice and they got 5 minutes to practice juggling on their own. And then the other group was given 3 cues for how to pass a ball, right? Toe up, strike through the middle of the ball, plant foot, points to your target, right? And then we taught those 3 kids those 3 cues. We got them kind of passing between like they had sort of 2 gates and they were in pairs trying to pass through the gates. And then once the group that learned the passing, they had to go and partner with somebody who was juggling and teach that partner what they just learned in passing, right? And it was really interesting because soccer is a sport that there are no timeouts and kids have to problem solve. And we know that the best kids, especially when you're looking at countries like Brazil or Spain, are learning on their own. And so peer coaching is a chance for kids to have to learn how to work with somebody else, but it's also an opportunity for them to learn a little bit about the game so they can learn how to self-correct. And so we would do that. And then we would take a break. The kids who had first learned passing, they got to juggle for 5 minutes, and their partners who had started off juggling had 3 cues for receiving. And then they went and they paired up and they had to teach the 3 cues for receiving. And so it's really interesting because we got kids to learn how to pass and receive. They had to take ownership of teaching somebody else, which helps them to develop that skill. And so it's just a neat technique if you're working with kids, like I said, 10-year-olds, sort of, definitely 11 and 12. Can you, instead of you always being the instructor, can you have the kids take that on? I'm just making sure everybody can see as my chat pops up. It's not covering my screen. Another really interesting thing to help kids feel ownership in their team and also get them to develop a little bit of leadership and stuff is assigning tasks. People joke because my daughter at 7 and 8 knows how to set up a 2v2 field, and they know how to, like if we're going to do the gate game, a couple of the players know how they just put their arms out and they make gates, and then they can make smaller gates and bigger gates. And so what I always joke about is like a perfect practice for me is if I've had a group for, a few seasons, like they can set up the activities without me, right? And I think that helps them to really take ownership, but it also helps them to learn to do things on their own so that they can set it up at school at recess, right? They could set it up in their backyard playing with friends. Sometimes we'll ask kids to keep score. Sometimes we ask kids to officiate. I actually now have a older sister of on my team who, she comes to practice and we just need an extra player. So she started to play, and then she kind of started helping out fields, and I kind of made her an assistant coach. And so even though she can only be at practice for like 20 minutes because she has her own practice, she always comes for the first 20 minutes and like helps set up. And then when she can be at the games, she like helps write out the lineup. And then she's like, well, what can I do? And I keep giving her things to do. But like last season, she would like write out the lineups, and then she would tell kids, hey, you've got to watch, you're going to go in for this player. And it was kind of neat because she's only like a year and a half older than her sister, but she's really become like a pretty good assistant coach because we just kept giving her these management taps at practice. But ultimately you want to promote leadership, right? And as kids are getting older, leading warm-ups, once, kids don't need to stretch really under the age of 10. At 10, you can start kids stretching so they understand the routine, because at 11 and 12, physically, they need to stretch. But we have kids lead warm-ups, and it's a simple way of just giving them a voice, right? With my high school, kind of middle school boys team, we had like a FIFA 11 kind of warm up. It's a rec team, right? But we had them jogging and stretching, and myself and the girl who helped me, we kind of led it the first couple practices. And then we led it with a couple players the next couple practices. And then midway through the season, the boys just did it on their own. And every once in a while they had to look to us, but it was a way for us to kind of help create leaders, get them into it. We do captains a lot, but it's captains within activities, right? So you're gonna be the captain of this group when we're playing 2v2, and then you're gonna be the captain of this group when we're playing 4v4. Okay, now you're captains of the teams, and depending on the age, the captains might be making sure every kid has pennies. The captains might be, when we do a break, making sure as kids get older that they're helping people switch positions. But once again, creating these opportunities for the kids to lead themselves is really important. We always ask kids about choosing activities. kids love certain games, and that's okay. Especially if you want a fun warm up, you can ask the kids to choose those activities. You can also ask the kids to explain the games, right? It's a great way to give people a voice. I started with 7 and 8 year olds where I might help them explain sharks and minnows, but they play sharks and minnows at elementary school. They've played it in other games. And so I have 7 and 8 year olds helping to explain how we're going to play sharks and minnows. And it just, once again, we want kids coming to practice and they know that they're helping to lead practice, and we alternate and take turns doing that. That kind of goes into choices and voices, right? We're giving them an opportunity to choose their activities. We also, as kids get older, even rec kids, once again, 10, 11, and 12, if an activity is not working, I'll ask the kids, like, are we having fun right now? Okay, well, why aren't we having fun? What can we do so that we can score more goals? And I use that guided discovery. I had 2 grids the first day of my new season, and one was kids who, had been here before, and the other kid was kind of new kids. And all of a sudden the play stopped in the one grid, and I looked over, and the one girl was like, they were doing rock, paper, scissors. And what happened is last year we had issues where like a ball would go out of bounds and they would fight over like whose ball was it and who brought it in and how come they're not getting turns. And I was like, ladies, you need to be problem solvers. So like if a ball goes out of bounds, how can we figure out how to get it back in, right? Like one team is just okay with the other team having it, right? Like what's another one? And one of the solutions they said was rock, paper, scissors. And so now that group who's been here before, like, hey, if we're arguing, we just go to rock, paper, scissors and we get one round, and that's how we solve the problem. But it's giving them a chance to have a voice, giving them opportunities to figure things out, because during a game, they have to figure it out because the game's free flowing. And then the idea of the assessment and giving them a chance, like, how did you like practice, right? Giving the shout outs of who did well. The thermometer, like, did you have a good day today? Were you respectful today? So that's kind of I would say the holistic approach to kids, and just the things to think about how you set your practice up so that you're engaging the kids. When it comes to nuts and bolts, there's certain things of like, how should we coach kids? So one big thing is we just want to give time to observe, right? Like a lot of times when my kids are in their first play phase of practice, I'm just watching. If I know we're working on passing, I'm watching and seeing, are they good at passing, right? Like I haven't told them anything about passing yet, but we're about to come in and like preview our practice. Like, what are they doing well with passing, right? What aren't they doing well? Sometimes I might just need to remind kids, hey, you need to keep your toe up when you're passing, right? Or remind kids about, hey, like the ball keeps going in the wrong direction, right? You got to remember to plant your foot at the target. I try not to use the command too much in games, right? I don't want to be like screaming at kids. I really try to let the game play out, but there are some times if, I had kids that didn't know their left from their right. And so there were times where I just had to be like, hey, Maddie, you're on the left side. That's the parent side, right? And I use that command to get her on the right side of the field. A lot of what I use is guided discovery, and that's asking questions. So if I have kids that aren't planting their foot and pointing to their target, I might ask them, hey, what are some of the cues that we talked about for how to pass the ball correctly, right? Where does our, and if they don't tell me about plant foot, then I might ask a next question of, where does our plant foot point to so that we can hit our target? So a lot of times my coaching isn't telling them what to do. It's asking questions so that they can think about what to do, right? How can I do that? Another part of that is just demonstrating. Sometimes it's having a kid demonstrate. Sometimes I might demonstrate how to pass. But these are all ways that we can coach kids and we can get across the information that we want. If I'm teaching passing tonight, I may ask, the girl Caroline, who came from our junior academy back down to rec, she said she wasn't fun, but she's really good and she knows how to pass. And so I may ask her to demonstrate how to pass, and then I'll talk through, like, she's striking the middle of the ball. Notice her toe is up. Notice that her plant foot's pointing in the right direction. Sometimes it's just giving feedback to the group. And then sometimes we use positive reinforcement, right? When we're talking to kids, we want to say a name and then say something soccer specific about what they're doing. A lot of times coaches just say, that's great, that's great, that's good. One, kids don't know if you're talking to them or somebody else. And kids may also not know what they did that was good. So like, Caroline, that was great. You had your toe up when you were passing. You know, Callie, that was fantastic. You got really low when you were trying to sell your dribbling move, but using that positive reinforcement. And then it's a matter of when. You only have 60 to 70 minutes of practice. If you stop to give coaching points, even if they're really quick, you're taking up 30 seconds. If you do, 20 coaching points that take 30 seconds, you've just lost like 10 minutes of your practice. So the ball goes out of bounds, you can make a comment to a player, right? A goal was just scored. You make a comment to the team as the ball is going back. That's a great opportunity to make a coaching point. It can be at a halftime. I do a lot of activities where the kids are going for a minute because it's high intensity. And so at the end of that minute, I might give a little more information. They do it for another minute. At that break, we go another minute. In the flow, kids are dribbling around and I'm just reminding them, hey, remember, you really want to get low when you're trying to change direction, right? Hey, that's great. You're all doing a good job of passing and moving. Remember, when we receive the ball, we want to receive and move with it, right? So as the game's going, if I'm going to freeze, when do you freeze or pause? My thing that I was always like, I have tried these other strategies. I have tried to tell them, at a break, hey, remember to put your toe up or something. I have tried to remind them, in the flow, hey, toe up. I might have even talked to an individual and they're still not getting it. And I look around and the majority of the people are doing something wrong. And that's when I freeze it. Or, we talk about bunching. 6, they're going to bunch. 8, they're going to kind of bunch. 10, it's kind of not so much. 12, they sort of physically and mentally understand space. But sometimes I might use a freeze moment with my 9 and 10-year-olds of just like, hey, what shape? We're playing 4v4. What shape should we really be in if we're playing this game, right? And they look around and then they're like, diamond. And then they kind of go like this. I'm like, okay, right? But that's when everything is chaotic and I can freeze it. And then this is going to be my last kind of points. And I know we're getting in there, is it's a concept called rest. The US Soccer Foundation talks about it. And the idea is I can change the rules of a game if something's not working. This is, we're playing 3v3 and the kids are just shooting from everywhere and it's kind of chaotic. So I can say, hey, from now on, you have to be inside of an end zone in order to shoot. And now I get those kids having to move the ball into an end zone to get it closer. I avoid the chaos of just balls being played everywhere. And so if my 3v3 isn't working, I might be able to change the rules of the game. If one kid's dominating, right? Something I might say is, hey, we have to get 3 passes before we go to goal. But we can change the rules of an activity to try and improve it and make it work. Oh, we can change equipment, right? So if my team is really struggling going to 2 center goals, maybe I can play a 4-goal game and now we're going to get more opportunity to shoot and score. And so I can change the equipment in an activity. With our college kids, we would do games where sometimes we would challenge them by using a size 3 soccer ball. So they were having to pass and move, but then we put in a 3-size soccer ball to make it more challenging for them. So we can change the equipment in an activity, changing the goals, changing the type of goals. Can you go to an end zone or are you going to a big goal, a small goal? If we're trying to get our topic out more. Space. This is a tight space. If I'm working with 8-year-olds and they're playing 3v3 and they're really struggling to keep the ball in bounds, they're really struggling to pass and possess, then maybe I just step the cones out, and now there's more space, which allows for passing. It allows for them to have a ball, and it's the defender's farther away, so they're able to dribble. So changing space can help make an activity more or less difficult. And then finally, time. A lot of times time and intensity are related. If I want kids dribbling, I don't say, hey, we're going to work on dribbling. Everybody just dribble around, and they dribble for 3 or 4 minutes. We'll do dribbling for a minute, dribble however you want for a minute. And then I start to count down, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, right? Or 10 seconds, 9, 8, and they'll start dribbling faster, right? If I just said everybody dribble for 5 minutes, they would not be able to go at a high intensity for 5 minutes. So my 8 and 9-year-olds, hey, we're dribbling for a minute. How many gates can you get through in a minute? When it hits 30 seconds and they're maybe only at 6, they know they have to go faster. When they say 10 seconds, all of a sudden they're racing around going through gates. So changing time can change the intensity. And then, like I talked about earlier, setting those time limits, right? Instead of saying we're going to go for 10 passes, we're going to just pass for 2 minutes. Instead of saying we're going to juggle for the first one to get 10, we're just going to juggle for 2 minutes. And that allows the activity to have a little bit more success. And so there's different adjustments like that. Big takeaways. I know we're at time. I went a little bit over. I got into this. I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell. Fun is the most important thing. You can teach kids all you want in a season of U7 soccer, but if they don't want to come back for U8 soccer, then it doesn't matter if your team went, 10-0. It doesn't matter if that kid was the best kid. They're now playing another sport or they're doing something else. So you want to keep them coming back. Intentional. Think about, like, how does your session flow? If we worked on dribbling moves, does my game at the end, am I allowing those kids to practice those dribbling moves and do it? Am I reminding them at the end of the game, like as we're playing that game, hey, we worked on pullbacks, right? If you start going out of bounds, remember, you can pull the ball back. Relationships, kids like their coach, especially young, they want to be praised often. They want to feel like they have a safe space. And so can you connect with players so they want to come back? Like, my partner was just joking. She's like, a bunch of your kids are now in the academy, and the ones that came back are all the ones that like weren't very good. And I'm like, but they love, they enjoy it. Like, we're fun, right? They get to play. And, I don't know, like, one of the girls who wasn't very good last year, she was fabulous last week. And, she just hit her stride, and, she's more coordinated than she was last year. And I don't know where she's going to be, but the player she was last season, the player she is this season are two totally different kids. And last year she didn't, we had to really work with her about making it fun and making her want to be there. And, she kept looking at her parents a lot of times because she felt like she was constantly making mistakes. She literally was like this a lot of practices. And then just the other thing is planning is crucial. And to be fair, USYS has taken a lot of that away because you can just go into a Mojo app and you have a planned session. So I've talked a lot. I apologize. I got into this. Warren, that's all I have. I really appreciate everybody being on here. I know you're building this out for your webinar series, but does anybody have any questions or comments, or is everybody gone?
Oh, no, they're still here. But hey, I appreciate it a ton. I really like the examples you put in there too, especially the breaststroke one. Holy cow.
Yeah.
She's competed 2 days after she learned them.
She
That's
literally, we were watching YouTube, like how to teach the breaststroke as we were driving to her meet. And then in our city, they have like like everybody gets to be in city meet, and then they have like a championship, and she made her championship level. Once again, those aren't like, it's not championship, but she got really nervous because all of a sudden she was in the championship and the kid was so much better. I'm like, you literally learned the breaststroke like 27 days ago. This kid swims 3 days a week in the morning. Like, she's supposed to be better than you, right? Like, you have overachieved everything we wanted.
That is awesome.
Maria or Justin or Lorenzo, if anybody has any questions, I can send this to Warren. And the idea is we just wanted to give you strategies, right? You can find the activities to piece things together. so many clubs just give you a weekly session plan at the rec level, but hopefully these were some coaching strategies that you could kind of build into those activities, and think about, right? And it's a lot, but you have it to go back and refer to if you want.
Good pause. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Justin, come on.
Hey guys. Again, this has been really, really great and informative. I'm very much a grassroots soccer coach. I've never played before. So I've been using Mojo and it's been pretty great. My wife is also a teacher, so everything that you were saying is something that she's kind of been backing up with her and her kiddos on positive reinforcement and, you know, trying to single out players that aren't really doing what they need to do and kind of give them some positive reinforcement and things like that. But no, this has just been really great. My whole thing is I'd really love to see these slides so that way I kind of have them because again, preparation is very much key, and I'm trying to prepare. I've got 2 teams, so I'm trying to kind of prep for both. I've got a 4U and a 7U, so I've got my hands full this season.
Yeah. And I would say the more you can ask for parents, even if it's just like standing behind a goal, if balls go out, or just watching, like I have an assistant coach who's my shoe tire during games, because the first season, right? Like this is my job. And my first season at U7, I just assumed I could do it. And then I was like flagging at the brand. I'm like, I need some, like I can't watch the game because every kid's shoe is untied at a different time, you know, like, so just getting help. But like I said, the sessions you can always find online and are laid out. It's those nuanced sort of strategies that I hope helped and to think about, that can make or break a session.
Yes, that it helped greatly. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. And anything else from anyone?
And just if you'll send me an email, then I'll attach this whenever I get it.
Will do.
Hey, we're good. Hey, thank you very much for taking the time out of this. Kind of give a plug for our next one. We'll have Dave Simeon on in 2 weeks. He'll be covering his analysis of youth soccer as it pertains to the World Cup, especially this last Women's World Cup. So it should be very interesting. And then we're going to progress on to needs for coaching education in the future. But I appreciate you taking your time out of your day and joining us, Sari. It was unbelievably informative. Those are great techniques too, especially relationship building stuff. I think that's amazing. And the fact that you have the kids coming back to you, there's a lot about you and the coaching that you do and the techniques that you use are obviously useful. You know, because I always thought the best grassroots coach is not necessarily the one that wins all the games, but the one that has all their team signed back up. And so that's a testament to you and the job that you're doing. And obviously the stuff works. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that. Yeah.
And then if you want to just give me a call after just to debrief, if you don't mind, so I can get feedback on just the presentation, that'd be great. Okay.
Sure. I'll do that for sure.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you. I appreciate it.
Take care. Thank
All
y'all.
right.